The big ships came without warning. They filled the sky above Earth like dark clouds. These were the ships of the Draconis, the most feared beings in all the stars. "They are here," said President Yoon to his team. "The dragons have come." All around the world, people looked up with fear. The Draconis were known across many star systems. They were tall, scaled creatures with wings and sharp teeth. They breathed fire and took what they wanted. No one said no to the Draconis and lived. In a small house with a garden, far from the big city but close to where the world leaders would meet the Draconis, lived the Kim family. They had a little girl named Gia. She was 6 years old with bright eyes and 2 black pigtails that bounced when she ran. "Gia, come inside now," called her mother, Yoon, from the doorway. "It's not safe today." "Why, Mama?" asked Gia, who was picking flowers in the garden. "Important visitors have come," said Yoon. Her face looked worried. "We need to stay inside until they leave." But Gia didn't understand why flowers couldn't be picked just because visitors had come. So when her mother went back inside to answer the phone, Gia stayed in the garden. The sun was warm on her face as she moved between the rows of vegetables that her grandmother had planted. Butterflies danced around her and she tried to catch them with her hands. "I'll make a crown of flowers for grandmother," she said to herself. Putting more flowers in her basket, 2 kilometers away, at the big meeting place, humans in fancy clothes stood nervously. They waited for the Draconis leaders to arrive. Soldiers with guns lined the walls. "They say the Draconis eat the people who don't agree with them," whispered one man to another. "Quiet," said Dr. Han, the human who knew the most about space creatures. "They have very good hearing." The doors opened. Everyone held their breath. The Draconis walked in. They were even more scary than in the pictures. The leader, Supreme Commander Dak, stood 3 meters tall. His scales were black with red edges that seemed to glow. His wings were folded behind him, but they looked strong enough to carry him high into the sky. His teeth showed when he spoke, sharp and white. "Humans," he said in a deep voice that made the windows shake. "Your planet has resources we need. You will give them to us or we will take them." Back in the garden, Gia had found something strange hiding under a big leaf. At first, she thought it was a lizard, but when she looked closer, she saw it had tiny wings folded against its body. Its scales were black with red edges, just like the big Draconis, but this creature was only the size of a small cat. "Hello there," said Gia, getting down on her knees to look at it better. "Are you lost?" The little creature hissed. Its red eyes glowed and it showed its tiny sharp teeth. Its tail had a pointed end that looked dangerous. Any grown-up would have run away screaming. They would have known this was a baby Draconis, the child of the scary space dragons. They would have called the army or the police, but Gia was only 6. She didn't know about the Draconis or why everyone was afraid. She only saw a small, scared animal. "Don't be afraid," she said softly. "I won't hurt you." The baby Draconis hissed again and tried to look big and scary. It puffed up its chest and spread its tiny wings. Gia giggled. "You're so cute." Like an angry little lizard, the baby Draconis stopped hissing. It tilted its head to one side as if no one had ever called it cute before. Its glowing red eyes blinked slowly. "Are you hungry?" asked Gia. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a cookie her mother had given her earlier. She broke off a small piece and held it out. "Here you go." The baby Draconis sniffed the cookie. Then very slowly it moved forward. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air. Then it took the cookie piece from Gia's hand and ate it quickly. "See? I'm your friend," said Gia with a smile. The little creature made a sound that was almost like purring. It moved closer to Gia, no longer acting afraid or angry. "I think I'll call you Minu," said Gia. "You look like a Minu." At the meeting place, something strange happened. Supreme Commander Dak was in the middle of telling the humans what they must give to the Draconis when he suddenly stopped talking. His head snapped up and his eyes grew wide. All the other Draconis did the same thing at the same time. They looked like they were listening to something no one else could hear. "What is happening?" asked President Yoon. Dak didn't answer. He seemed frozen in place. Then he turned to one of his helpers, a female Draconis named Suk. "A hatchling," he said in their language. "One of our young has formed a bond." "Impossible," said Suk. "All hatchlings are on the mothership." "Not all," said Dak. His voice was different now, less sure. "My son, my heir. He is not in his safe place." Back in the garden, Gia had made a small bed of leaves for Minu. The baby Draconis was now sitting in her lap, letting her pet its scales. They were smooth and warm like sun-heated stones. "You can stay with me," said Gia. "I'll take care of you." Minu made the purring sound again. Then, to Gia's surprise, the little dragon climbed up her arm and settled on her shoulder. Its tail wrapped gently around her neck, not tight, but like it was holding on to keep from falling. A strange feeling came over Gia. It was like she could feel what Minu was feeling. The baby dragon was hungry, a little scared, but also happy to have found her. These feelings weren't in words, just in feelings that Gia somehow knew. "You can understand me, can't you?" she asked. Minu nuzzled against her cheek. At that moment, Gia's mother called from the house again. "Gia, come inside right now." "Coming, Mama," Gia called back. She looked at Minu. "You have to come too, but we need to be quiet. Mama might not understand about you yet." Gia walked toward the house with Minu riding on her shoulder. She didn't know that across the city, the meeting between humans and Draconis had stopped. She didn't know that Supreme Commander Dak had demanded to know where his missing son was. She didn't know that soldiers and Draconis guards were now searching the area. All Gia knew was that she had found a new friend, and she was going to take care of him. As she reached the back door, Minu made a small sound, almost like a word. "Friend," it seemed to say, though not in a human language. "Yes," said Gia, smiling. "Friends forever." She opened the door and stepped inside, carrying with her the beginning of a change that would affect not just Earth, but all the stars where the Draconis ruled. And it all started because a little girl saw past the scary outside and called a dragon cute. Yoon was making dinner when Gia came into the kitchen. The smell of soup filled the air. The radio was on, talking about the Draconis ships and telling people to stay inside. "Wash your hands for dinner," Yoon said without turning around. She stirred the soup with a wooden spoon. "Yes, Mama," said Gia. She walked to the sink, trying to hide Minu behind her back. The little dragon was very quiet, as if he knew they needed to be sneaky. Gia turned on the water and stood on her tiptoes to reach the sink. Minu peeked over her shoulder at the running water. His red eyes grew wide with wonder. "Do you like water?" Gia whispered. Minu made a small chirping sound. "Who are you talking to?" asked Yoon, finally turning around. When she saw the small dragon on her daughter's shoulder, she dropped her spoon. It clattered on the floor, splashing soup everywhere. "Gia?" she gasped. "What is that?" Gia smiled proudly. "This is Minu. I found him in the garden." He was lost and hungry. Yoon's face went white. Everyone on Earth had seen pictures of the Draconis. This small creature looked just like them, only tiny. "It could only be a baby Draconis, Gia," Yoon said very slowly, trying to stay calm. "Come here to me," very slowly. "Why?" asked Gia. "Minu won't hurt you. He's my friend." As if to prove her point, Minu nuzzled against Gia's cheek. The little dragon made a purring sound that filled the room. Yoon didn't know what to do. The radio had said the Draconis were dangerous. They had come to take things from Earth. They were not friends. But here was her daughter, holding a baby Draconis that seemed gentle. "He was all alone, Mama," said Gia. "Can we keep him, please?" Before Yoon could answer, there was a loud knock at the door. It was so hard that the whole house seemed to shake. "Open in the name of Earth Defense," shouted a deep voice. Yoon looked at the door, then at Gia and the baby dragon. "Hide in the closet," she whispered to Gia. "Now!" Gia didn't understand why, but she could tell her mother was scared. She ran to the hall closet and climbed inside with Minu. Through a small crack, she could see her mother go to the door. Yoon opened the door to find 4 soldiers in black uniforms. Behind them stood 2 tall Draconis. One was female with lighter-colored scales. The other was male with dark scales and many scars. "We have detected a hatchling in this area," said the female Draconis. Her voice was surprisingly soft for such a big creature. "A young one of our kind," and tried to look calm. "I don't know what you're talking about." The male Draconis pushed past the soldiers and entered the house without asking. He sniffed the air, his long snout moving from side to side. "The hatchling is here," he growled. "I can smell it." In the closet, Minu began to shake. Gia could feel his fear through their strange connection. She hugged him close. "It's okay," she whispered. "I won't let them take you." But the male Draconis heard her whisper. His head turned toward the closet. With 3 long steps, he was there, pulling the door open. Gia looked up at the huge dragon. He was like Minu, but 100 times bigger. His teeth were as long as her fingers, and his eyes glowed like fire. "There you are. Little thief," he said to Minu. "You have caused much trouble." Minu hissed and pressed closer to Gia. She could feel that he was not just scared, he was terrified of this big dragon. "Leave him alone," Gia said, standing up in the closet. She was so small compared to the Draconis, but she stood tall. "He's my friend." The big dragon looked surprised. He turned to the female who had come up behind him. "Sook," he said. "The human child is protecting the hatchling." Sook leaned down to look at Gia. Her eyes were not as scary as the male's. They looked almost kind. "Child," she said, "do you know what you have found?" "His name is Minu," said Gia, "and he was all alone in our garden." Sook's eyes widened. "You named him?" "Yes," said Gia. "He likes his name." The male Draconis made a strange sound, almost like a laugh, but more like a growl. "This is Dak's son, the heir to the Draconis Empire. And you call him Minu?" Yoon had pushed past the soldiers to stand near her daughter. "Please," she said to the Draconis. "She didn't know. She's just a child." Sook held up a hand. "Wait. Something is not right here." She looked closely at Gia and Minu. "The hatchling is not trying to escape. It is comfortable with the human child." The male Draconis sniffed the air again. His eyes grew wide. "Impossible," he said. "They have bonded." "Bonded?" asked one of the soldiers. "What does that mean?" Sook turned to the humans. "A bond is a sacred connection among our kind. It happens only once in a lifetime, usually between a hatchling and its chosen parent or guardian. But this is a human child," said the male Draconis. "No Draconis has ever bonded with another species." Gia didn't understand what they were talking about. She only knew that Minu was scared, and these big dragons were making him more scared. "If you're going to be mean to Minu, you should leave," she said bravely. The male Draconis looked like he might get angry, but then he did something surprising. He knelt down to be closer to Gia's level. "Little human," he said, "I am not here to be mean. I am Tay, the protector of all hatchlings. This one," he pointed to Minu, "is very important. He is the son of our leader." "He was all alone," said Gia again, and hungry. Tay nodded. "Yes, he escaped during our landing. We have been looking for him." Sook knelt down too. "Child, can you feel what the hatchling is feeling?" Gia nodded. "He was scared before. Now he's still scared, but also curious about you." Sook and Tay looked at each other in amazement. "It is true," said Sook. "They have formed a true bond." Just then, there was another knock at the door. This time it was even louder than before. The soldiers opened it, and everyone in the room bowed or saluted. A massive Draconis entered the house. He had to duck to fit through the door. His scales were the darkest black with bright red edges. A crown of bone spikes circled his head. This was Supreme Commander Dak, the leader of all Draconis. "Where is my son?" he demanded. His voice made the windows shake. Tay and Sook moved aside. Dak saw Gia standing in the closet doorway, still holding Minu. The little dragon looked at his father and made a small chirping sound, but he did not try to go to him. Instead, he stayed close to Gia. Dak's eyes narrowed. "What is happening here? Why does my son not come to me?" Sook bowed low. "Supreme Commander, something unexpected has happened. Your son has formed a bond with this human child." Dak looked shocked. "That is not possible." "See for yourself," said Tay. "The hatchling will not leave her side." Dak approached Gia slowly. Even though she was scared, Gia did not back away. She could feel through her connection with Minu that it was important to be brave now. "You," Dak said to Gia. "What did you do to my son?" "I found him," said Gia simply. "He was alone and scared. I gave him a cookie and called him Minu because he looks like a Minu." "A cookie?" Dak seemed confused. "And you named him?" "Minu?" Gia nodded. "He likes his name. And he likes me." Dak looked at his son, then at the human child. Something changed in his eyes. They became less angry, more curious. "In all our history," he said quietly, "no Draconis has ever bonded with another species. We believed it was impossible." Yoon, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "What does this mean for my daughter? Is she in danger?" Sook shook her head. "No. A bond is sacred among our kind. It cannot be broken without harming both the hatchling and the one it has bonded with." "So what happens now?" asked Yoon. Dak straightened to his full height. "Now," he said, "everything changes. Aegon cute." The Kim family's small living room was now very crowded. Supreme Commander Dak took up so much space that he had to crouch to avoid hitting the ceiling. The other Draconis, Suk and Tay, stood near the walls. 4 human soldiers remained by the door looking nervous. 2 more people had arrived. Dr. Han, the human expert on space creatures, and President Yoon himself. Jia sat on the couch with her mother. Minu was curled up in her lap, making soft purring sounds as she stroked his scales. The little dragon would not leave her side even when his father, Dak, called to him in the Draconis language. "This is truly amazing," said Dr. Han, watching Jia and Minu. "I've studied the Draconis for years, but I've never heard of a bond with another species." "Because it has never happened before," said Suk. "This is new to us as well." President Yoon looked worried. "What does this mean for our talks? For Earth?" Dak's large eyes stayed fixed on his son and the human child. "That remains to be seen," he said. Yoon put her arm around Jia protectively. "My daughter is just a child. She doesn't understand politics or space problems. She only saw a creature who needed help." "That is what makes this so interesting," said Suk. "Draconis hatchlings are naturally careful. They do not trust easily. Yet this one trusted your daughter right away." Jia looked up at all the serious faces around her. "Is Minu in trouble?" she asked. Dak made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. It might have been a laugh, but it was hard to tell. "No, little one. My son is not in trouble, but he has created a situation. Can you explain this bond more clearly?" asked Dr. Han. "What exactly does it mean?" Tay stepped forward. "A bond is a mental connection. The hatchling and its bond parent can feel each other's emotions, sometimes even thoughts. It is how we raise our young. The bond teaches them and keeps them safe. And now my daughter has this connection with Minu," asked Yoon. "Yes," said Suk. "They are linked." "Can you feel it, child?" Jia nodded. "I know when he's happy or scared, and he knows when I'm happy or scared too." Dr. Han looked excited. "This could change everything we know about interspecies communication." "It changes more than that," said Dak. His voice was deep and serious. "My son is my heir. He will one day lead all Draconis, and now he is bonded to a human." The room went quiet as everyone thought about what this meant. "Can the bond be broken?" asked President Yoon. Suk and Tay both looked shocked at the question. "Breaking a bond would harm both the hatchling and the child," said Suk. "It is not done among our kind. It would be cruel." Jia hugged Minu closer. "I don't want to lose Minu," she said. Her eyes filled with tears at the thought. Minu sensed her sadness and made a sad chirping sound. He nuzzled against her hand, trying to comfort her. Dak watched this with great interest. Then he did something that surprised everyone. He knelt down in front of Jia, making himself as small as possible, which was still very big. "Child," he said, his voice softer than before. "What did you think when you first saw my son?" Jia looked up at the huge dragon face in front of her. She was not afraid anymore. "I thought he was cute," she said honestly. "Like an angry little lizard." Tay made a choking sound as if trying not to laugh. Even Suk's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Cute?" repeated Dak. He seemed amazed. "The Draconis are feared across 17 star systems. We are called many things, terrible, fierce, deadly, but never cute." "Well, Minu is cute," said Jia firmly, "and he was scared and hungry. So I helped him." Dak's eyes narrowed as he studied the human child. "You were not afraid of his teeth? His claws? The poison in his tail?" Jia looked surprised. "Poison? I didn't know that." She looked down at Minu, who was now sleeping peacefully in her lap. "But he would never hurt me. We're friends." "Friends," said Dak slowly, as if the word was new to him. "Draconis do not have friends. We have allies, servants, and enemies. Everyone needs friends," said Jia. "Even dragons." President Yoon cleared his throat. "Supreme Commander, what does this mean for our talks? For the demands you made earlier?" Dak stood up to his full height again. "The situation has changed. I must consult with my advisors." He looked at Suk and Tay. "We will return to our ship and discuss this development." "And my son?" asked Yoon. "What about Minu?" "The hatchling stays with the child for now," said Dak. "Breaking them apart would cause distress to both." "But you'll come back for him?" asked Jia, looking worried. Dak looked down at her. "I will return tomorrow. There is much to consider." After the Draconis and the officials left, the Kim house felt very empty and quiet. Un made tea with shaking hands while Gia played with Minu on the living room floor. The little dragon was more active now, chasing a ball that Gia rolled across the carpet. "Mama," said Gia, "why was everyone so serious? Is something bad happening?" Yoon sat down next to her daughter. "The Draconis came to Earth to take things from us. They are very powerful and scary to most people. But now, because of you and Minu, things might be different." "Different how?" asked Gia. "I don't know yet," said Yoon. "But I think you did something very special today." That night, Minu slept curled up on Gia's pillow. His small body gave off heat like a tiny furnace. Gia fell asleep feeling safe and happy, with no idea of the big changes happening because of her and her new friend. On the Draconis mothership, Supreme Commander Dak called a meeting of his top leaders. "My son has bonded with a human child," he told them. "This changes our approach to Earth." "How so?" asked one of his generals. "We can still take what we need by force, and harm my son in the process." Dak's eyes glowed with anger. "The bond is real. I saw it myself," Suk stepped forward. "There is something else, Supreme Commander." The human child showed no fear of the hatchling. She called him cute and offered him food and shelter without hesitation. "One human's kindness does not change our plans," said the general. "Perhaps it should," said Tae. "We have always taken what we wanted because we could. But what if there is another way? A way that does not require fear and force?" Dak paced the room, his tail swishing behind him. "The human child treated my son with kindness when she had no reason to do so. She did not know he was my heir. She saw only a creature in need." "What are you suggesting?" asked another leader. "I am suggesting," said Dak slowly, "that perhaps we have been wrong about humans. And perhaps we have been wrong about many things." The next morning, Gia woke up to find Minu sitting on her chest, watching her with his bright red eyes. He made a happy chirping sound when she opened her eyes. "Good morning, Minu," she said with a smile. "Are you hungry?" Through their bond, she could feel that he was indeed very hungry. She carried him downstairs to the kitchen where her mother was already making breakfast. "How did you sleep?" asked Yoon. "Good," said Gia. "Minu is like a warm blanket." Yoon smiled, but Gia could tell she was still worried. "The Draconis will be back today," she said. "And probably more important people too." "Because of Minu?" asked Gia. "Yes," said Yoon. "Because of you and Minu." Just as they finished breakfast, there was a knock at the door. When Yoon opened it, she found Suk standing there alone. "May I come in?" asked the female Draconis. "There is much to discuss before the others arrive." Yoon let her in. Suk sat down at the kitchen table, looking too big for the human-sized chair. "Little one," she said to Gia, "you have changed everything. Do you understand that?" Gia shook her head. "I just found Minu, that's all." Suk's eyes were kind. "That is not all. You showed kindness when others would have shown fear. You saw beauty where others would have seen danger, and in doing so, you may have saved both our worlds." The Kim family's garden was now full of important people. Workers had brought in big tables and chairs. Human leaders sat on one side and Draconis leaders sat on the other. They had been talking for hours. Gia didn't care about the big meeting. She was playing with Minu near her grandmother's vegetable patch. The little dragon was getting better at flying. He could now jump and glide for a few seconds before landing. Each time he did this, Gia clapped and cheered. "Good job, Minu," she said as he glided from a low wall to her outstretched hands. Minu made happy chirping sounds. Through their bond, Gia could feel his joy and pride. He was showing off for her and he loved making her happy. From the big table, Supreme Commander Dak watched his son play with the human child. His face was hard to read, but his eyes never left the pair. "As I was saying," continued President Yoon, "Earth is willing to trade fairly with the Draconis. But we cannot give you 20% of our minerals. It would hurt our own people." Dak seemed to barely hear him. "Look at them," he said, nodding toward Gia and Minu. "My son has never been so playful." Dr. Han, who sat next to President Yoon, leaned forward. "Is that unusual for Draconis young?" Suk answered, "Draconis hatchlings are usually serious and careful. They begin training for battle as soon as they can fly." "Battle?" asked Yoon, who had been quiet until now. "But they're just babies. Our way of life has always been about strength and power," said Tae. The young must learn early. Gia's laughter rang out across the garden as Minu did a little flip in the air. The sound made everyone at the table turn to look. She is teaching him to play, said Dak, sounding amazed. I have never seen a hatchling play like this. Dr. Han wrote something in his notebook. Play is how human children learn, he explained. It helps their brains grow and helps them understand the world. Interesting, said Suk. We have always believed that strict training was the only way to raise strong, young. President Yoon saw a chance to change the subject. Speaking of learning, we could offer educational exchanges instead of so many minerals. Our scientists could share knowledge with yours. But Dak was still watching Gia and Minu. The human child, he said suddenly. Bring her here. Yoon looked worried, but she called to her daughter. Gia, come here, please. The leaders want to talk to you. Gia ran over with Minu flying just above her head. The little dragon landed on her shoulder as she reached the table. He was getting bigger already, now the size of a large cat. But he still loved riding on her shoulder. Hello, said Gia politely. She had been taught to be respectful to grown-ups. Dak leaned down to look at her closely. Child, you have formed a bond with my son that should not be possible. How did you do this? Gia shrugged. I didn't do anything special. I just wasn't mean to him. Wasn't mean? Repeated Dak. Is that all? Well, I gave him a cookie, said Gia. And I told him he was cute. And I wasn't scared of him. You weren't scared? Asked Tay. Even when he hissed and showed his teeth? Gia shook her head. He was just scared himself. Scared things try to look big and scary so other things won't hurt them. The Draconis leaders looked at each other in surprise. How do you know this? Asked Suk. My grandmother told me, said Gia. She says even the biggest, meanest dog is usually just afraid. If you're kind to it, it will be kind back. Dak made a rumbling sound in his chest. Your grandmother is wise, he said. But Draconis are not dogs. No, agreed Gia. Minu is much smarter than a dog. And he can fly. As if to prove her point, Minu spread his wings and did a small circle around Gia's head before landing back on her shoulder. He's getting better at flying, said Gia proudly. I've been helping him practice. Dr. Han couldn't help but smile. It seems the bond works both ways. The child is teaching the hatchling, and the hatchling is teaching the child. What has my son taught you? Asked Dak, looking at Gia with new interest. Gia thought for a moment. He taught me that I can feel what others feel if I try hard enough. And he taught me that some things that look scary aren't scary at all once you know them. Dak sat back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. Out of the mouths of children, he said quietly. What does that mean? Asked Tay. It is a human saying, explained Dr. Han. It means that sometimes children see truth more clearly than adults do. Suk looked thoughtful. Perhaps there is wisdom in this. We have always relied on fear to get what we want. But fear creates enemies, not friends. And everyone needs friends, said Gia, repeating what she had said earlier. Even dragons. Dak stood up suddenly. He was so tall that he seemed to block out the sun. I have made a decision, he announced. The Draconis will not take resources from Earth by force. The human leaders looked shocked but happy. Instead, continued Dak, we will form an alliance. A friendship, as the child says. An alliance, repeated President Yoon. What kind of alliance? One based on mutual benefit, said Dak. We have technology you need. You have resources we need. And you have something else we never knew we needed. What's that? Asked Dr. Han. Dak looked at Gia and Minu. A new way of seeing the universe. A way that does not put power and fear above all else. Suk stood up too. Supreme Commander, are you sure about this? It goes against centuries of Draconis tradition. I am sure, said Dak firmly. My son has shown me a truth I could not see before. There is strength in connection, not just in conquest. The meeting continued for many more hours, but Gia got bored and went back to playing with Minu. The grown-ups talked about trade and technology and many other big words that Gia didn't understand. As the sun began to set, Yoon came to find her daughter. Time to come inside, Gia, it's getting dark. Can Minu stay with me tonight too? Asked Gia. Before Yoon could answer, Dak approached them. My son seems happy with you, child, he said. But he must also learn the ways of his own people. Gia's face fell. Are you taking him away? Dak knelt down, which was still like a mountain bending over. Not taking him away forever. But he must spend time with both his families now. Both families? Asked Gia. Yes, said Dak. His Draconis family and his human family. You. Gia's eyes widened. I'm his family? The bond has made it so, said Dak, and bonds are forever among our kind. Yoon looked worried. What exactly does this mean for Gia? Suk joined them. It means your daughter will always have a connection to the hatchling. As they grow, the bond will grow too. They will learn from each other. And it means, added Dak, that your daughter is now under the protection of the Draconis Empire. No harm will come to her while I live. Yoon didn't know whether to be relieved or more worried. And Minu? Will he live with us or with you? Both, said Dak. He will spend time in both worlds. It is the only way he can grow to understand both peoples. Gia looked at Minu, who was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. Will he be sad when he's away from me? The bond will let him feel your presence even when you're apart, explained Suk, and you will feel his. Distance cannot break what has been joined. As the stars came out, the Draconis leaders prepared to return to their ship. Dak looked down at his son one last time. He stays with you tonight, he told Gia. Tomorrow, we will begin making a new plan for how to share him between our worlds. Okay, said Gia, but be nice to him. He doesn't like it when people are angry or loud. Dak made the rumbling sound again, which Gia now realized was laughter. I will remember that, little one. It seems I have much to learn from both of you. As the Draconis left, Gia waved goodbye. Minu woke up just enough to chirp softly at his father before falling back asleep in Gia's arms. Come inside now, said Yoon. It's been a very big day. Gia nodded and yawned. Mama, did I do something important today? Woon smiled and stroked her daughter's hair. Yes, my love. I think you may have changed the whole world today. All because you were kind to someone who looked different. 1 year had passed since Gia found Minu in her grandmother's garden. Many things had changed in that year. The Kim family now lived in a bigger house with a much larger garden. The new house had 2 special rooms. One was made for Minu with heat lamps and climbing walls. The other was a meeting room where important people from Earth and the Draconis Empire could talk. Gia was 7 years old now. She was taller and could read many more words. But she was still the same kind girl who had seen a scared baby dragon and called him cute. Minu had grown too. He was now the size of a big dog. His wings were strong enough for real flying, not just gliding. His scales were shinier and the red edges glowed brighter when he was excited. He could breathe small puffs of fire, but only when he tried very hard. Today was a special day. It was 1 year since the bond between Gia and Minu had changed everything. Leaders from Earth and the Draconis Empire were coming to celebrate. Gia, are you ready? Called Yoon from downstairs. The guests will be here soon. Almost, Mama. Gia called back. She was in Minu's room, helping him practice a special trick they had been working on. Okay, try again, she said to the young dragon. Gentle flame, remember? Minu nodded his head. He took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and blew out a small, controlled flame. It was just big enough to light the candle Gia was holding. Perfect, she clapped. You did it. Through their bond, she could feel Minu's pride and happiness. He had been practicing this trick for weeks, learning to control his fire so it wasn't dangerous. Gia hugged Minu's neck. You're going to impress everyone today. They went downstairs together. The house was already filling with guests. Human leaders in fancy clothes stood talking with Draconis visitors. A year ago, this scene would have seemed impossible. Humans had been terrified of the Draconis, and the Draconis had seen humans as weak creatures to be conquered. Now they were allies, working together on many projects. Draconis ships protected Earth from other dangerous aliens. Earth scientists worked with Draconis experts to solve problems that affected both worlds, and it had all started because a little girl wasn't afraid of a baby dragon. There they are, said Dr. Han, who was now the head of the Human Draconis Friendship Program. The pair that changed history. Gia smiled shyly. She still didn't like being the center of attention, but she was getting used to it. Minu walked beside her, his head held high. He liked the attention more than she did. Supreme Commander Dak entered the room. Everyone bowed or nodded to show respect. He had become less scary to humans over the past year, but he was still an impressive figure. His black scales and red eyes made him look fierce even when he was trying to be friendly. My son, he said, looking at Minu. You have grown strong. Minu made a happy chirping sound and ran to his father. They touched noses in the Draconis greeting. Then Minu ran back to Gia's side. "And his bond human," said Dak, looking at Gia. "You have grown too." "Thank you, sir," said Gia politely. She had learned how to talk to important people in the past year. President Yoon stepped forward. "Shall we begin the ceremony?" Everyone moved to the garden where tables had been set up under colorful tents. Flowers and lights decorated the trees. It looked magical. Gia and Minu sat at the front with their families. Un and Gia's grandmother sat on one side. Dak and Suk sat on the other side. They were an unusual family, but they had learned to get along. President Yoon stood up to speak. "1 year ago today, our worlds changed forever. The Draconis came to Earth as conquerors, but they stayed as friends. And it all began because a child saw past appearances to the heart beneath." Everyone clapped. Gia felt her face getting hot. She didn't like being talked about this way, but she knew it was important. Dak stood up next. His deep voice carried across the garden without him having to shout. "For centuries, the Draconis Empire grew through fear and power. We took what we wanted and destroyed those who stood in our way. We believed this was strength." He looked at Minu and Gia. "We were wrong. True strength comes from connection, not conquest. My son has taught me this through his bond with the human child." Suk stood up next. "In the past year, we have learned much from humans. They have shown us that kindness is not weakness, that seeing beauty in others is not foolish, that friendship can be more powerful than fear." Dr. Han added, "And we humans have learned from the Draconis too. We've learned about courage and honor. We've learned new technologies and sciences. Together we are stronger than we ever were apart." After the speeches, there was food and music. Human children played with young Draconis who had come with their parents. A year ago, this would have seemed impossible. Now it was becoming normal. Gia and Minu performed their special trick for everyone. Minu lit all the candles on a big cake with his careful fire breath. Everyone clapped and cheered. Later, when the party was quieter, Gia sat with Dak in a quiet corner of the garden. Minu was sleeping nearby, tired from all the excitement. "He is happy," said Dak, looking at his son. "Happier than I have ever seen a young Draconis." "I'm happy too," said Gia. "Minu is my best friend." "You know," said Dak, "before I came to Earth, I had never heard a Draconis called cute before." Gia giggled. "But he was cute." "He still is, even though he's bigger now." Dak made the rumbling laugh sound. "Perhaps that is what we needed all along. Someone to see past our scary outside to what was within." Grandmother says you should never judge by how something looks, said Gia. "The scariest things are often the most scared themselves. Your grandmother is very, wise," said Dak. "I would like to meet her properly." "She's over there," said Gia, pointing to where her grandmother was talking with Suk. "She's teaching Suk how to grow earth vegetables." Dak watched the two females, one human, one Draconis, sharing knowledge as if they had been friends for years. "A year ago, I would have destroyed this planet without a second thought," he said quietly. "Now I find myself learning from its people." "Learning is good," said Gia simply. "Minu and I learn from each other all the time." Through their bond, Gia could feel that Minu was dreaming. Happy dreams of flying with her on his back, soaring through clouds. Soon he would be big enough to carry her for real. "What will happen when you grow up?" asked Dak suddenly. "The bond is for life. Will you come to live among the Draconis?" Gia hadn't thought that far ahead. She was only 7 after all. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But Minu and I will figure it out together." Dak nodded. "Yes, I believe you will." As the party ended and guests began to leave, Gia stood with her mother and watched the Draconis ships in the night sky. They no longer looked scary. Now they were beautiful, like extra stars watching over Earth. "Are you happy, Gia?" asked Yoon, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Yes, Mama," said Gia. "But I'm also a little tired of being special sometimes. I just want to play with Minu and go to school like other kids." Yoon smiled. "I know, and you will. But you also did something amazing, my love. You showed everyone that friendship can come from the most unexpected places." Minu came to stand beside them. He was getting too big for Gia's shoulder now, but he still pressed against her side, his warm scales comforting against her arm. Through their bond, Gia could feel his love and loyalty. She didn't need words to know that he would always be her friend, no matter how big he grew or how far apart they might sometimes be. "Mama," said Gia, "do you think other kids could make friends with Draconis too?" "I think," said Yoon, that you have shown everyone what is possible when we look with our hearts instead of our eyes. In the sky above, the stars twinkled alongside the lights of Draconis ships. The universe suddenly seemed less scary and much more interesting. There were probably other aliens out there, waiting to be discovered. Some might look scary at first, but perhaps they just needed someone to see past their outside to the heart within. And maybe, thought Gia as she hugged Minu, that someone would be another child who wasn't afraid to call a scary thing cute. The end.